In my first video about Doctor Who's missing episodes, I set the stage, and now I'm going to introduce you to the players. First, the BBC's drama department. Now, this was the department that made the drama. In 1963, the new head of the department, a Canadian man named Sidney Newman, came up with the idea for a science fiction show and handed it off to a young producer named Verity Lambert, and that was how Doctor Who got made. But what happened to those episodes of Doctor Who after they were broadcast? Where, specifically, did the master copies of the videotapes go? Allow me to introduce you to our second major player, the BBC Film Library, which is important because it is not the place where those videotapes went. Despite what I said yesterday, the BBC did understand that it was probably not a great idea to just throw everything away all the time. So they had this archive called the BBC Film Library where all material on film would be kept for posterity, but Doctor Who did not go there because Doctor Who was not on film. As I have alluded to, it was on videotape. And videotape, being this newfangled, expensive, high-tech thing, was not something that the BBC had developed a comprehensive policy for archiving. They only had such a policy for film, and so with a few exceptions, the BBC Film Library just didn't get episodes of Doctor Who. Now, videotape, being a comparatively new technology, was the responsibility of our third major player, the BBC Engineering Department. And because engineering was in charge of videotape, they were also in charge of storing videotape, or at least videotape that the other departments of the BBC still needed. But they were engineers, not archivists, so their department didn't have the facilities to store that kind of material in the long term, and so they had to use just whatever cabinets and cupboards they had on hand. Now, in Doctor Who's case, before the tapes were delivered to engineering, they took a slight detour to our fourth major player, BBC Enterprises. BBC Enterprises was a separate but wholly owned commercial subsidiary of the BBC. As I alluded to yesterday, the BBC was and is a public service broadcaster operating under a royal charter and not for commercial purposes. So a lot of its commercial activity was conducted through a subsidiary, specifically BBC Enterprises, and that primarily included the sale of programs to overseas broadcasters, which is one of the reasons BBC Enterprises is known today as BBC Worldwide. BBC Enterprises made these episodes available overseas on 16mm film. Yes, film. Not videotape, film. Videotape was new and different, and not everyone used it, and not everyone knew how to use it, and everybody had their own different kinds of videotape, and so that would have been just a big mess. Film was pretty much the same everywhere in the world. Everyone knew what it was, everyone had the equipment, everyone knew how to use it, everyone knew how to store it, everyone knew how to transport it overseas. It was great. So BBC Enterprises chose to use it because it was overall just better for worldwide commercial use. Now, they made their film copies through a process known in the US as kinescope and known in the UK as telerecording. This means playing the videotape on a big flat screen monitor, pointing a film camera at it, and filming it. Now, this may sound really amateurish to us in the age of digital reproduction, but actually the copies it made were fairly good. So to sum it up so far, an episode would be produced by the drama department to air on BBC. Then a copy would be made by BBC Enterprises, who would keep the film negatives and positives and make the episode available all over the world. The videotape would go to the engineering department. So we've got a copy in Enterprises, and we've got a copy in engineering. Now, neither Enterprises nor engineering had been tasked with the responsibility of keeping these episodes in the long term. And it's not entirely clear today whether at the time they realized that there was nobody keeping track and making sure copies of the episodes would always exist somewhere. Maybe they thought a copy was being kept in the film library, maybe engineering and Enterprise each thought each other was keeping a copy, maybe they just never really thought to worry about it for the reasons described yesterday, who knows. Now, keep in mind that the engineering department didn't really have a whole lot of room to store all this videotape, and at the time videotape was pretty expensive. And it was also reusable. So they would keep everything for a few years just in case someone needed it, but after a while they had a policy of either wiping or junking old videotapes. They started doing this to Doctor Who in 1967, and by the mid-70s, all of the black and white Doctor Who episodes from the 1960s were gone from the engineering department forever. All of them. Gone. No exceptions. But there were still film copies because a couple of episodes had made their way into the film library for one reason or another, and BBC Enterprises did have a more or less complete set of Doctor Who episodes, at least as of 1972, but these episodes had lost their commercial viability because the overseas rights agreements with the cast and crew had expired. And anyway, the world was more or less done with black and white television by now, so there wasn't much demand for 1960s Doctor Who. So BBC Enterprises did what they usually did when they no longer had any use for the material. They started junking it. And then in 1978, they stopped. Now, legend has it that this is because of Ian Levine. Now, I'm not going to explain who Ian Levine is and his place in the world of Doctor Who, because if you don't already know about it, it's too weird and complicated to go into in this particular venue. Suffice it to say that at this point, Ian Levine was a wealthy record producer and Doctor Who super fanboy. The story goes that Levine was given special permission by the BBC to buy old copies of Doctor Who episodes from BBC Enterprises for his own personal collection. So one day in 1978, he went to BBC Enterprises to do just that, and he walked in on them about to destroy all 7 episodes of the 1963 First Doctor story, The Daleks, featuring the historic first appearance of the Daleks. And as the legend goes, Levine personally rescued these episodes and made sure that Enterprises stopped junking old Doctor Who material. There's probably some truth in that, but who knows how much. In any case, by 1978, it was abundantly clear that even though reruns were not a thing, home video was, or soon would be. Plus, people were beginning to wise up to the social, cultural, and historical value of keeping old TV episodes around. So at this point, the BBC officially rechristened the film library into the film and videotape library and stopped junking and wiping old episodes of TV. But the damage was done. As for what exactly was missing, how they managed to get some of it back, and how fans ended up coping with the absence of over 100 episodes of their show, that is a topic for part 3.